Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, partners, dear colleagues, a warm welcome in a virtual format, this Univention Summit 2021. It's a strange image here to look at a few lights and only a few people, but I'm happy to see that a lot of people have registered. It's a very challenging year that we've gone through with a number of very tragic personal events, but also a year of opportunity, because 2020 was also the year where we as the IT industry proved that we can make the crucial contribution to keep important functions of our society, of business and of private communication going. 100 years ago, during the last big pandemic, this would not have been possible, and it worked better than expected. The internet really kept up very well, even though everybody shopped, learned, and communicated privately from their homes. But this also put a highlight on many deficits that we still have, particularly in the context of schooling, where many, even though some states in Germany and school boards have made progress, there's huge differences here, and I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to support different states such as Bremen, Schleswig-Holstein and Brandenburg. But even the planning of this Univention Summit was quite challenging. This is what this room looked like a year ago, as you can see it here on the screen now, and we would have loved to meet you in person, celebrating with you in the evening, etc. That's not possible, but we will continue to focus on personal communication. This is why I would like to encourage you to visit our partners at their virtual stands, visit their workshops. It's our partners who have made this the biggest and most interesting networking event of the open source community in Germany and the German-speaking area. And I would like to thank our sponsors for this. 2021 was also a year for the 2020 was a year for Univention that we won't forget too easily. We grew faster than in 2019. We had an increase in turnover of 20% in 2019, and in 2020 we were able to grow by 35%. And also in terms of staff members, we grew significantly. For instance, our leadership team simply doubled in terms of headcount to create the basis for further growth. The basis for growth in the past have been the hundreds and thousands of UCS customers across the globe who stayed loyal to us in the course of the last year. We're very happy about that. And we're also happy about many new UCS projects and implementation. For instance, the school portal for Schleswig-Holstein, the state of Schleswig-Holstein, with the attached systems such as learning management systems, etc. And many other states and school boards use UCS and UCS at schools, so that we were able to triple the number of users in education. That's due to the pandemic, of course, to a large extent. But also outside of schools, UCS is becoming increasingly popular. For instance, with SUSE company, who have established an identification management system for schools, and Boniversum has a similar ID system with a community with more than 100,000 users. I would like to mention also the many Max Planck, Fraunhofer and Leibniz institutions which have used UCS to replace proprietary infrastructures. And one of the most important projects that we got last year is the Phoenix project by Dataport that we managed to get together with our partner Bechtle, which tries to establish communication platforms as an alternative to Microsoft 365 or G Suite. Our success requires focus again and again, and this is why we also discontinued features and products over the last few years, and we really focus on open source identification management, a user portal, and an app center for integration for all sorts of applications. The reason for this is that the basis of our customers and the application areas for UCS have shifted from all-round solutions to for smaller and medium-sized customers to larger solutions, more dedicated solutions for larger customers with hundreds of thousands of users. And you can see it here on this graph. The number of our users has more than doubled last year. At the same time, the number of support tickets has actually decreased slightly. This is a success for which I would like to thank our staff more than anybody else. Ladies and gentlemen, it is particularly in this month that we were shown in a dramatic way how much we depend on working with IT systems that we can control, where access to data can be managed by ourselves, that we can design ourselves in an innovative way. The social media accounts of the US president were blocked. We may be happy about it that this should have happened. Why? Because a crazy person was really deprived of an opportunity to incentivize violence, but at the same time, it was the president of a democratic country. So the internet platforms showed how much power they have and that they can use this power when they feel fit. So it's a small group of small people who have no democratic legitimacy at all, who decide who can use their platforms, who can speak up, and who cannot. And I'm afraid that as long as it is the internet platforms that use intransparent algorithms that decide which content we get to see and how our opinions and attitudes are influenced via the content that they display to us. As long as this is the case, our democracies and our free countries, our free societies, are on a very shaky ground. And it justifies despots who use these technologies to identify unwanted interests, incorrect opinions, and incorrect behavior. And I think next to the American platforms, this is one of the worst threats to our democracy, and it's is penetrating ever more applications. The surveillance system, aptly called Skynet, as in the movie Terminator, that the Chinese developed, allows to identify incorrect activities or opinions, leading to bans on air travel, public exhibition, or even prison terms, speaks for itself. And that is a threat. And yet, at the same time, the model that China promotes, as opposed to American surveillance capitalism. And then there are those who use the same opportunities, the same abilities to collect, aggregate, and analyze data to make their technologies available to their own customers, i.e. companies and states that can use their own proprietary analyses, for instance, for secret services, but also for Microsoft. Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, says in his book Tools and Weapons that nearly any technology can be used either as a tool to help to benefit humankind, but also can be used as a weapon against people. Microsoft does this in a very sophisticated way. They present themselves as the good guy, and they defend their own turf by even calling for regulation by the government, but often unsuccessfully, because American law requires companies to cooperate with the secret services. So they are simply forced to release data. At the same time, a lot of pressure is used to develop a global computing platform. Satya Nadella calls it the world's computer. And these platforms are used with proprietary software that we cannot see. And it grows with every new application, with every new customer, like an American dragon. And it allows for similar things as the Chinese do today. If you want to know as an employer which of your staff members uses the wrong files or has excessive breaks, takes excessive breaks, well, this information is recorded by Microsoft 365 and can be analyzed if Microsoft so wishes. Or you wish to know which of your students do their homework at the wrong time, that information is available too. The point here is not, I believe, the fact that data is recorded and made available for analysis. You can debate what's right or wrong here. The point here is that Microsoft and Microsoft alone decides which data is recorded. It may be any data they can get their hands on, and which of this data is then made available to who, for which purpose. So we can't know, for instance, today, what happens with the data that is recorded about a student today, 10 years down the road, and who they are made available for what analysis. With fundamental rights and self-determination rights in democratic societies, this is necessary to know which data is available for which purpose and for what period of time. And we won't be able to safeguard such democratic freedoms and our right to self-determination by making agreements with companies. We need to be able to control these processes, design these processes, and change them if we so wish. And this need, I believe, is under threat. Let me tell you the story of Cortexa. Imagine an internet platform with an AI system that they use to create the internet platform Cortexa Inc. And this AI system can be used as the perfect call center. Cortexa accepts calls, has friendly chats with callers, will take orders, will actually agree on down payment schedules. Of course, it would have to have access to numerous data of the customers, otherwise it could not be successful. And then suddenly there would be a version of Cortexa that is used by European companies, operated on European data centers. The pressure for public authorities is high to introduce more user-friendly systems, And maybe a decision is made to use Cortexa for public authorities. And for schools, Cortexa would, at first glance, be a profitable proposition. Cortexa could provide learning content custom-made for every student because it would know their students as well as a good teacher does. What I'm saying is Cortexa would penetrate ever more areas, it would get ever more features, it would have ever more users, it would get ever bigger and potentially become what Satya Nadella calls the world's computer. At the same time, the pressure on users would increase to use Cortexa. Customer organizations could no longer be organized in an economical way without Cortexa. Public authorities that don't use Cortexa are considered backwards, and if a education ministry does not use Cortexa, they will be in the bottom ranks of PISA evaluations. And a company that doesn't use Cortexa would have very poor ratings by Standards & Poor. That sounds a bit like the Brave New World, right? But what price do we pay for it? First of all, Cortexa would be a massive security risk. It would have an incredible amount of knowledge about the state, society, and individuals. Backdoors could be introduced via software updates and could not be found, even if the program is run on European data centers. So data leaks could not be prevented, and it would always be possible to threaten to switch off Cortexa altogether at the detriment of states or individuals or companies. But even if we could avoid this kind of thing, which I find difficult to imagine, there's another risk. The more we depend on Cortexa in terms of digitization or for digitization, the more of our formative capacity we lose, because only those data services and thinking and knowledge models will be available that Cortexa makes available for us. And now I lost my train of thought. So we only have those models available that Cortexa makes available to us. Designing your own models would be difficult because Cortexa could not access this kind of data. And the services that Cortexa can make available to improve efficiency can no longer be used. So this kind of pseudo-innovation would be inevitable. So innovation would not really mean to come up with anything really novel. Innovation would simply mean who introduces the largest number of Cortexa features faster than others. Do you believe that's implausible? I don't think so. This is exactly the models that companies such as Google, Amazon, Microsoft, possibly Apple, and of course the Chinese are working on. Cortexa would become a dramatic risk for the innovative capacity of state and society. So just like the operators of Facebook and Amazon can decide today who can use their social networks and who can operate them, Cortexa could generate massive benefits to individual states or companies at the detriment of others. And that would, of course, immediately lead to a call for regulation at the international level. Actually, it is being demanded already. It would be demanded that everybody can use Cortexa under the same conditions, that there are clear rules for access. There would be a lot of governmental measures to avoid abuse. And Cortexa would not oppose this. On the contrary, it would demand this itself. It would offer implementation of these measures because such regulation and its implementation would mean that Cortexa has a huge competitive advantage, a huge hurdle, a huge barrier for competitors. And this would be the exact time when Cortexa would become a part of our state controlled by private individuals, and then what would happen would be what we've seen in the past. Cortexa would have less and less competition, would be less and less innovative, and would increasingly focus on safeguarding its own monopoly. And in order to avoid this, in order to make sure that we don't have, that we don't create one or two such juggernauts that make us open to attack and manipulation, we need to have a different vision, another information technology. And this vision that we share with many in the open source community and outside of it, and that we fight for, focuses on freedom, self-determination, control, and formative capacity. It creates the precondition for making innovation independent of any others in any country, any organization, and individual. And the resulting distributed parallel approach, it enables the creation of much more good things than a single Cortexa juggernaut would ever be capable of. The basis for the implementation of such a vision is that everybody must be in a position to control who accesses data that they generate and what they use this data for. And that absolutely requires the use of open source software, and that is the basis for the possibility of confidential communication. The source code must be open to analysis, but it must also be capable of being understood, manipulated, and changed, and used in a changed way. And also services must be capable of being operated in your own data center, but everybody does not have to operate their own IT infrastructure. Cloud must be possible, but the cloud must not be based on the principle everything or nothing. The fundamental principle established here is called federability. The decision to process or not important data in your own data center must not lead to the situation where you can only use the services of a single supplier. These are the three central principles. They must be open, federable, and permit-free. Only if we follow these three principles will we be able to overcome this dichotomy between self-determination and trust, or this contradiction. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the time to act. The pressure to introduce such cloud products is large, even on the German government. The Microsoft products that the government can use have a contract running only to 2025, and after that the government has to decide what service to use, and there is huge pressure to use Microsoft clouds. There are some people who think it would be easy to proclaim cooperation with a global multinational, which will make things easier to run. But as a society, we have to ask whether we want to succumb to this pressure, whether we want to yield some of our control and sovereignty to such companies such as Microsoft or others in San Francisco or Redmond. Or whether we want to keep control of these things, such a strategy is possible, but it only works if we based on the following three principles. First of all, government and industry need to establish binding rules on how system-relevant, critical, and confidential data need to be processed. And one of these fundamental rules is that there must be open interfaces allowing for the use of open source software and the possibility of choosing your cloud service provider freely. The state, with its enormous buying power, needs to be a pioneer here, implementing these rules first of all. And wherever freely usable technologies are not available, targeted investment is required so that suppliers and the market can arise in the first place. With such a strategy, we do not close the market off. On the contrary, we create clear rules applicable to all to create a new competition with companies, jobs and technologies that are interesting not only for public administration in Germany and Europe, but for administrations and industries across the globe. And I'm very happy that in the course of the last year we were able to participate in some initiatives and projects that pursue this strategy. One of those is the Sovereign Cloud Stack project that ensures that other users can use open source software for a federal cloud service that can be established. Then we have the OSB alliance with Vitaco, which we use to create an initiative for open source repository for public services. And then there is our contribution to creating a simple and secure authentication to promote the digitization for schools and others. And there is the Phoenix project, which next to the Sovereign Cloud Stack project is one of the most important projects of them all, to create scalable alternatives to the hyperscalers. All of these initiatives can only be promoted because we are not alone in implementing them, and oftentimes we're not even in the lead role. That is the point that that is the point of open source, that we pool the resources of many participants who all row in together. And this is why I can present to you another important initiative here today. With the Sovereign Productivity Suite, SPS, which we have created, we want to improve the sovereignty for public administration, but also for education systems, and we want to make it much easier. For this, a number of strong and successful open source companies have got together from Open Exchange, Nextcloud, and Univention, and we want to create joint offerings with joint support, joint prices. And together with public administration, we will try to promote integration. The Sovereign Productivity Suite, with its components, is already the core of Phoenix, one of the core pieces of Phoenix. We're very happy that with Janus we have found an important cloud service provider who are willing to cooperate here and want to make SAS solutions available based on SPS. But of course, SPS can be operated with the data center or service provider of your choice. All of this must be done in a way that is open for future developments and with state-of-the-art cloud platforms. We need to use containers, native applications, etc. And this is why we have embarked on a restructuring of UCS in order to enable ourselves to offer cloud services, but also to make our software available on physical hardware. You'll hear more about this by Ingo Stoiber in his presentation. Well, I think 2020 was a year where we achieved a lot, where we often created the groundwork for successful digitization of schools, where in many other institutions and companies we introduced SCS, and where we started important initiatives such as the sovereign cloud stack or the sovereign productivity suites that I just mentioned. But we cannot rest on these laurels. We have to continue digitizing schools as fast as we can, and particularly as a society, we need to pave the way for a digitization that focuses on transparency and control. And we have to pursue such a strategy with a vengeance and with courage and commitment. We as Univention are on board, and I know that many of you are as well, so let's not lose any time, and then we will move towards a type of digitization that focuses on people and their organizations very quickly, faster than we ever thought. This is why we need to get together, talk with each other, exchange ideas. This is why we organize this annual summit. It used to look differently. This time around it's all virtual, but the team of Plain Schwarz has created a platform over the last few weeks, and I think we can use it to communicate, and we will make the wires run hot. Thank you very much.